Welcome to the 60th episode of the Underdog Sports NBA show. I am Tyler Laurie, and I am joined as always by my co-host on the left coast, Zandrick Ellison. Zan, you got fire Emmy takes, or should we go right to the Atlantic Division?
Well, I think people are liking the deep dive into previews, team by team, division by division. We went an hour and a half last week. Hopefully we don't match that, but I think the audience is responding because I just saw did you know this, Tyler? Top 20 sports show in Albania.
It's pretty good. What are we in Kazakhstan? Do we have numbers on that?
And we're pivoting. We're going to become an all Albanian podcast, and that's why I wanted my first question to use this. Is Gurdy Shima the best Albanian player of all time?
I have no idea.
Number one, or is it a debate?
Does Albania have any NBA players ever?
Well, it's funny. I did some research because we have our beloved Albanian fans. There are some who are like naturalized Albanian citizens, like Mike Moser. Remember him?
Okay, yeah.
He now has an Albanian passport. But still, give me Gurdy Shima. I'm sorry, I'm sticking with it.
All right, we are doing the Atlantic Division today. Albania. You never know how you're going to start on this show because we talk about a lot of other things before we actually get on the air, like whether or not Daniel Jones is the greatest quarterback in the history of the NFL. But we don't. Just so you guys know, we don't think he is. We think Bruce Arians is the worst coach in the NFL. Daniel Jones somewhere in the middle on quarterbacks. But Atlantic Division this week, Zandrick, a very interesting division in the sense that I think people think it's very good. My fire take on this, like my overarching take is like I think this division is pretty overrated, but I think the East is so bad that I think they're going to get 4 playoff teams, and we'll kind of talk about that. Maybe 3. We'll talk about that. But
who are the teams? Because not everyone remembers.
Right. So we're going to do it in this order. We will do the Knicks, the Nets, the Raptors, last year's NBA champion, the Celtics, and the Philadelphia 76ers. As always, we will provide their record from last year, their over-under on Bovada Sportsbook, and then we will do best-case scenario, worst-case scenario, lineups, and league pass rating. So I think we want to start with the Knicks, right? And I think there's like some chance, Zan, that this is like the second most interesting team in this division because it's a really weird team. So, I mean, before we get into their numbers, like I just feel like this Knicks team this is like you do like a fantasy draft or something in NBA 2K and it's on like auto and you draft RJ Barrett because like the future, you're going to play 20 seasons and then you let it sim and all of a sudden you get these players and you're like, we might be okay, right? This is a weird team.
It's like we kind of talked about it with the Pelicans. Like it feels like they're two teams like jammed together. There's like the young, rebuilding, promising Pelicans team, and then the pretty good veteran team. And there's like 2 of them that are just smushed together without much in between. Like the Knicks feel like that, except they're just like the worst version on both fronts. Like the prospects aren't as good and the veterans aren't as good.
Yeah, that's actually a really good that's a really, really good comparison.
So they kind of had this like young team going with like,
all right,
Smith. You want to go through the
yeah, real quick. Sorry. So that was my fault. I went out of order. All right. So 17-65 last year, obviously the worst record in the NBA. Their over under on Bovada is 28, which is a 12-game improvement and like definitely not out of the realm of possibility, but obviously, they drafted RJ Barrett. We talked about this. My crack at their starting lineup, like I have no idea. But I put like Dennis Smith, Wayne Ellington, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, and then like maybe Mitchell Robinson. And then they have this whole other like conglomeration of players that just don't make any sense, right? So Wayne Ellington in, Julius Randle in. They added Elfrid Payton. They still have Alonzo Trier, still have Kevin Knox, drafted Iggy Brazdeikis, who we both really like. Marcus Morris is there. Taj Gibson is there. Bobby Portis is there. Reggie Bullock is there. This team is exactly what you said. It's like 2 teams, just like the Pelicans. They have their young guys, 5 or so players that people might be excited about. And then they have their old guys that are like all other than Julius Randle, like good enough to be like the 7th or 8th man on a decent team, I guess. What do they do with these? Like what are they doing with like Taj Gibson, Bobby Portis, Marcus Morris?
Yeah. I liked your analogy of like an auto draft because it's not a lot of rhyme or reason. Like the joke about them has been like they're all power forwards, and I guess it doesn't matter as much in modern NBA, but it's probably true. I would call Marcus Morris more of a power forward than a small forward. Knox, I think the same. And then Randall, he played a lot of center, but you would consider him like traditionally a power forward. Taj Gibson, same, and Bobby Portis, the same. Like those guys who can play center, of course, and they probably will, but it's not a lot of versatility in this lineup. It's just a lot of like, which bigs are you going to play?
And it's so odd because this is a group that they have like 4 guys that they just like absolutely need to play as many minutes as possible, right? And Dennis Smith Jr., RJ, Mitchell Robinson, Kevin Knox, I guess also Brett Stakis, Frank Ntilikina is still there. They need to play him. And then probably Alonzo Trier. So that's like 7 guys that like, if you look at that as your kind of like future, if you believe in RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson is pretty good, like those guys need to play a lot. And you need to see what you traded, Kristaps Porzingis for. So you got to look at Dennis Smith. And, I don't think either one of us really believe in Dennis Smith, but he's an interesting little prospect. But like, what is this team doing? Because those guys are not going to get as many minutes as they want. And then they also managed to get a group of veterans who all like want the ball in their hand.
Well, not more than that. Like, and I think that certainly applies to Julius Randle and Bobby Portis, who are just like offensive minded, power forwards, centers. And they're both kind of like a little underrated, I think, offensively and liabilities on defense, especially Randall. I mean, it's just not even his fault, I think. It's just like he's just sort of limited. I mean, he's just like a power big who's like a little short armed and he can't really guard on the perimeter and he's not long enough to guard inside. And defensively, he rated as the 68th best center among 70. So like kind of negated his offensive impact. So like, are these veterans winning players? Bobby Portis had a similar thing, negative 1.5, 85th best power forward on defense, according to ESPN plus minus. So those guys are big names and they're getting a big salary. Like, are they actually winning you more than an extra 2 or 3 games?
The only 2 additions that they have that I like, I guess like Wayne Ellington is, we'll get to him in a second, but like I think Wayne Ellington is a good player on a playoff team.
Yeah,
I like Julius Randle. Like I think there is a place in the NBA for Julius Randle. I think he's the type of guy, I kind of like him. He's not as good, obviously, but I kind of like him in like the pseudo Blake Griffin role on offense because like he can handle the ball, like he can pass it, but I think he's a small ball 5. Bobby Portis, I think, is a totally useless NBA player. Like he's going to average like 18 and 10, and people are going to be like, Bobby Portis is really good. He's another like Jabari Parker type that like you have to give him the ball. He'll put up numbers. His team will never win. He'll be terrible on defense, excuse me. And then like people like him. He works really hard. One of his teammates punched him in the face. I don't know if those things are related, but it's just like they grab these guys like Marcus Morris, like good player on the playoff team, but like what does he do on the Knicks? And I that's why I like for their best case scenario, I don't know what to write because the Knicks very clearly want to win games, and it's very counterintuitive to their core of guys that they should kind of be investing in. And hopefully in 2 years, when all these other contracts other than Randall come off the books, they get a shot at that free agency again to build around RJ Barrett. But this group of players they've assembled is going to hinder like RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson. So like, what are they trying to do? Are they trying to get the 7 seed? Is that what we think their best case scenario is, to try to make the playoffs this year?
It's very bizarre. Like, and I would love to be like behind the scenes. Like, what's the explanation? What's the thought process? Because obviously, like sometimes as fans, we think of team building as like fantasy. Like, hey, let's get LeBron James and 4 shooters around him, 3-and-D guys. Well, we're good to go. Like, it's hard to do that. Like, practically speaking, you can't sign everyone you want to sign, and you end up, with like the 4th option that you wanted. But even with that, there needs to be some sort of logic to it. And I think, like, do they not believe in RJ Barrett? They took him high, 3rd pick. He was sort of the obvious pick there. Do they not believe in him as like a franchise talent? Because if they did, you would surround him with shooting, because right now he's a below average shooter who can attack the rim. Like, I wouldn't put him on the court with a bunch of like average shooting roster. It just doesn't make sense to bring out his talent. And do they not believe in Kevin Knox? Because, I know he played really badly last year, advanced stats wise. But then you add a bunch of power forwards around him, and guys like Marcus Morris and Taj Gibson, like, they're going to want to play. And, Julius Randle and Bobby Portis are going to want to score and play and put up numbers. So, like, where does that leave Kevin Knox? So is it like do they just not trust their young core? Or are they just worried about their own job security and they think they have to win 35, 40 games?
Yeah, and that's the part where we talk about ownership all the time. Like, we don't know what James Dolan told Scott Perry. Like, I don't know. But my gut feel is that, like, I just think this season's going to go poorly for them. And I think they're going to have to pivot in the middle of the year. And I did say during free agency, like, I didn't mind these deals because they're, they come off the books in most of them are team options for the second year or team options for the third year or whatever. They had to spend money. They had a ton of cap space. They obviously didn't get Durant or whatever.
But did they have to spend a lot of money? I mean,
you got to get to the salary floor. So, like, they got to fill a roster. Did they have to spend on this group of players? Absolutely not. You're 100% right about that. But, like, maybe they think playing meaningful games is important for guys like RJ and Kevin Knox and Iggy. Maybe those, I don't know if we're supposed to call him Iggy, right? He can't be Iggy with Andre Iguodala still in the league. Do we have a nickname for Iggy B?
I don't think he's going to play as much as we'd want him to play, but
they need shooting so bad. Who else is going to make shots? I mean, they have Bullock and they have Wayne Ellington,
and Bullock has a health issue that he might not. Ellington
is Marcus Morris the third best shooter on this roster?
It's a bunch of average shooters. Randall shot pretty well last year, but he traditionally doesn't. Taj Gibson actually is efficient still. Like, I looked at his true shooting; it's still pretty good, but he doesn't shoot threes at all. So he's just like a mid-range like superstar. I don't know. I think it's one of those things too where you mentioned Wayne Ellington. He's almost like, I don't want to steal your bold prediction, but Wade Ellington would be a very nice fit for some playoff teams.
That's like very obviously one of my predictions. Like, there's too many veterans for this team that are not going to get to play and can be useful on good teams for them to end the season on. Like Ellington, Reggie Bullock, everybody's looking for shooting. Like, even Taj Gibson can obviously really help you. Marcus Morris can help you. Even like Elfrid Payton, if you need a third point guard who can also defend, like, it makes too much sense in the middle of the year for the Knicks not to be like, look, we're coasting to 31 wins. We need to absorb cap space. We need some assets for 2022. Like, there's just no way all these guys end up on the team. And Wayne Ellington and Bullock are the two that I circled because obviously teams just always are looking for shooting.
Yeah. And my prediction for this team too is that, like, Randall, I like him in the sense, I like your sort of, what do you call him? Bootleg Blake Griffin.
Yeah, bootleg Blake Griffin. That's good. That's a good nickname.
And it's true. We talk about that with Blake Griffin a lot and Zion a lot, that they're better passers and ball handlers than you think. And Randall's like a worse version of that. And he is a better passer and ball handler than you think. And he could average raw stats like 20, 10, and 5. Like, it's not shocking. I don't think it's going to translate to like winning games. I think he's going to like put up numbers and sort of become like the face of this team, so to speak. But they're going to lose, 50 plus games.
Yeah, there's part of me that really wants to say that, like, this is going to work out. And in looking at it before, I think before I actually like dove into the roster, I was like, you know what? Like, the bottom of the East is not very good. Like, they're going to get wins against teams they're better than, and then like, competing against like Detroit and Orlando with a bunch of like tough-minded guys who like want to score and play hard, which they do have. Like your Randall, Marcus Morris, Taj Gibson, Bobby Portis, those guys play really hard. That's the one thing to say about this team is, like, they're going to go out and they're going to try to win. They're going to try to be competitive. They've assembled a group of very like chippy guys. But like, I just can't help like looking at their worst case scenario, and it's like RJ really struggles. Obviously, the media beats him down. Kevin Knox has another bad year. Dennis Smith Jr. is just not necessarily a pure point guard. And then you have all these other guys that like need the ball and want shots. And like, how does it work out? So I have it like 25-75 that this just goes really south and that like they just win 25 games again. And then everyone gets shipped out. And then that leads me to my other bold prediction, which is that like David Fizdale gets fired. Because I just don't think he's the guy to turn this around. And I don't think they think he is either, by the way.
I agree with you. That was going to be my bold prediction as well. And I think that kind of through that lens, you understand why they tried to sign as good of players as they could, because they're like, hey, we're worried about our job security, GM and coach. And, scars of the past, David Fizdale, remember, he had a pretty good first year in Memphis. They went to the playoffs with like kind of a mediocre roster. And then he got fired 20 games into his second year. And it was kind of shocking at the time. And then he's entering year 2 now with the Knicks, not going as well as he did in Memphis. And, when Dave Yeager got fired from Memphis, I'm like, oh, they're idiots. What do they know? And then he gets fired by Sacramento. And then you start thinking maybe there's something wrong with the guy too. Like maybe just behind the scenes. And so with Fizdale, I worry the same. Like, I don't think he's going to survive a 25 win year. So,
And the Fizdale stuff, like I happen to know like a little bit about that, like not to reveal any sources or whatever, but I do know that there was behind the scenes stuff with Fizdale and management and some players where they were just kind of like, this isn't the guy. You know, it's how's that for data the year before and everyone loves it, but then when you're not winning, you know, personalities clash and you're just not going to win out. And James Dolan, we know, like, I just think Scott Perry is actually not bad at his job. Just so we're clear, like I think he got dealt a situation that's like, holy crap, like I need to be able to turn this around, and it's going to be very difficult. And that's why I think he did a lot of these little kind of like bridge deals, if you will, to get another bite at the apple. Like if he is still there, so I think what he's going to need to do in the middle of the year is just be like, hey, we're in full on rebuilding mode. Like we want to get some young assets. Like we want to put some guys around RJ that can shoot. Cause like right now they just don't have that. And I do think they are high on RJ. We kind of talked about that before. I think they are very high on RJ, and I think they should be, you know, I really do, because I think he's going to be a young guy who I don't think he's Andrew Wiggins. We've talked about that. I think he's better than that, but
no,
he's very
I
young.
like him. And he could be inefficient out of the gates.
I mean, that's going to be a guarantee, right? Like I didn't say anything about like their rookies making like any rookie team or anything. Cause I think RJ is just going to put up a ton of stats. Like he could be Michael Carter Williams again, where like he just puts up a ton of stats and you realize that they just mean absolutely nothing, but it looks like he's playing really well.
Not only do I think Fizdale will get fired at the end of the year, and I agree with you, like their front office isn't as bad as people think. I mean, you know, they have a decent track record prior to this, but I think they all should get fired. And I'll tell you why. Like, it's like the Miami Dolphins this year. Like, they're rebuilding. Great. It makes sense. Tank, you know, kick the can down the road 5 years. But if I'm Brian Flores in Miami, I'm like, am I going to be around in 4 years? And so, like, that's the risk. And with the Knicks, I feel like they're trying to kick the can down the road again. And it's hard to do that twice. Like, they've lost 50 games 5 years in a row. And with the promise that, hey, we're going to sign these superstars in free agency. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, we'll be bad, and then we'll sign superstars in free agency. You can't sell me on the same plan twice if it didn't work.
And that is why, like I said, I feel like Perry's going to start to sell and be like, hey, we're just going to build around these young guys. And then hopefully people look at RJ in 2 years and they're like, hey, this is a good player. Like, let's come play with him in New York. I think that's his path to keeping his job. Unfortunately for David Fizdale, I think his path is like he wins 40 games with this like weird group of guys. And they're like, hey, everyone's going to get better. Like, it'll be great. I just don't see it. There is no player on this team, Zan, that I am comfortable telling you I think is a starter on a playoff team. None of them. And I do think Randall and Marcus Morris are very good NBA players. I really do.
Well, and also like maybe it's the psychology of we thought we could land superstars in free agency based on the idea that we're the Knicks and we're in New York. And then they see the Stars sign with Brooklyn because partly they're a better team. They're like, you know, a playoff team. So they think maybe we need to be a playoff team too. So then Stars will push us over the top. But the problem is the Nets were really well coached and their roster kind of fit together well. It wasn't just like a log jam of like, you know, C+ players. So like, is Giannis dying to go play with Bobby Portis?
No, it's not. That's the thing. Like, and it's like a situation where the Nets drafted decently well. You know, they drafted Karis LeVert. They drafted Jared Allen. They certainly had their misses, but then they also took advantage of some other, like the Lakers were a dumpster fire and they trade for D'Angelo Russell. And it's like, hey, we're going to take a chance on that. They plucked Spencer Dinwiddie like off the scrap heap and put him in a situation to succeed. You know, they signed Joe Harris from Cleveland like for nothing, you know, and those guys end up being decent players. And like, I think the Knicks want to do that, but they have yet to figure out the right way to do it. You know, they're betting on Julius Randle. That's the guy they're betting on.
The Nets had a long-term plan. They used their cap space in the way that I would recommend, is taking on bad contracts, getting extra assets. The Knicks are kind of behaving like a wounded animal who's like desperate for survival, and they're lashing out and making wild, erratic moves.
That's a very good analogy. A bit dark, but it's a good analogy.
And it might become, they might get rabies soon, because I think if we talk about league pass rating, I would give it like a C, but like the behind the scenes league pass rating, I would give an A, because I want to see it. You know, Fizdale try to tell Marcus Morris, hey, you're only playing 10 minutes tonight.
Here's exactly what I wrote for that. B- just for the moments. Because you're exactly right. Like there's going to be so much hero ball. Like I want to see RJ. I want to see Iggy B. I do think Alonzo Trier is an interesting guy to watch. Like Mitchell Robinson, who we really haven't talked about, is a very good prospect. Whether or not he gets there surrounded by this group of like chippy guys, I will say. I don't want to say knuckleheads. Like Mitchell Robinson has some knucklehead in him that we know of. So, like, it's a weird conglomeration. I do want to ask one thing. How good is this group of young guys? That's another question.
No, it's a below average group of young prospects. I like RJ Barrett more than most.
Grade this group. We obviously do like, I think we both like the Pelicans better, but like right. RJ, Mitchell Robinson, Kevin Knox as your like kind of three, I guess. Dennis Smith, Iggy B, like those five. Can that be the core of a good team in the future?
No, that's why like fan bases tend to overrate their young players because they think, hey, we're young, therefore we must have a bright future. And that's true to a point. Like there's certain young cores that like Oklahoma City, is the best example when they had Kevin Durant and Westbrook. But like that's a core, if they grow up and develop together, they could win multiple titles. Most young cores are the kind of core that get better and better and better and end up winning 45 games and peaking there. And I think that's more of this core.
Yeah, it's really contingent on RJ Barrett being a star because, well, I do think Mitchell Robinson is very good. I mean, who is Mitchell Robinson at his best? Like, is he Rudy Gobert? That seems like a real stretch, honestly. Right now, at least, for a guy that young, maybe he is. But Rudy was also in a good situation, and he was given kind of like 2 or 3 years to kind of figure it out, and he was put around, very good coaches. And I don't know, like, is that his ceiling? Or is he Andre Drummond? Because we don't know if Andre Drummond's the best player on a 50-win team.
Let's move on. We've done too much on the Knicks, too little on Albania. We got to talk about, there's 4 other teams here.
Okay, Brooklyn Nets, 42-40 last year. Their over-under on Bovada is 44.5, which to me seems like right on the money. I think this is a 45-ish win team. Let's talk about it. All right, Kyrie in, KD in. He's obviously not playing this year. Rest of their starting lineup, Kyrie, Joe Harris, Karis LeVert. I believe Taurean Prince, Wilson Chandler's going to serve a 25-game suspension for failing a drug test for however many times he's done it. So I thought he would be their four-man, but he's not going to start the season as such. And then Jared Allen, I'm guessing, will be their 5-man. And then contributor Spencer Dinwiddie will play a ton. Garrett Temple is in. They did re-sign Theo Pinson, your guy. My guy, Kurix, Rodion's Kurix. We don't know what's happening with him. A little domestic violence allegation.
That's your guy? You're just
against him.
Are you going on record saying you support Kurix?
I like the guy. I don't know what he's going to do.
You like him off the court, though, right? That's what you're saying? You don't like him?
No, I'm not saying that. Don't do that. DeAndre Jordan in, and then the kid Musa, who they really like, is like a 2-guard. I think he's from Croatia. He's probably also there. This is a super interesting team. Their roster with Kevin Durant would look amazing. I think they'd be title favorites if he was at full strength because the 4 spot is the 1 spot I think they're weak. But I think the Nets, like, it's hard. There's a lot to like here. They're probably not good enough to win the title this year, but I do think there's a chance, like, they could maybe sneak into being like the 3rd best team in the East. I don't think they're better than Philly
without Kevin Durant.
Without Kevin, I like this team. I really like their 3 guards. I was going to wait to give you this take to league pass rating, but I sort of think they're like a poor man's group of like this year's Warriors, where it's like
interesting.
They're going to run a ton of ball screens. They grab some. They have athletic bigs, and then they have like 3 guards that are just going to score a shitload of points.
That's optimistic. More optimistic than I had thought. I agree with you on there's 2 Nets teams to me. Like there's the Nets with Kevin Durant, and there's some talk that he might be able to come back for the playoffs, and that would change their ceiling, of course.
He won't. I don't think he'll do that. Given what we've heard him say of late, I just can't see it.
Well, so the team, I agree with you. If healthy Kevin Durant on the Nets, I would probably pick them to win the title. And I'm a little biased. I love Kevin Durant. I think he's the best player.
But if you're saying that, like, and I agree with you, like they have the best player or one of the best 3 players. Kyrie is absolutely like a top 15-ish player, kind of draw your own conclusions. And then they have like a bunch of other like they have a bench scorer in Dinwiddie, a guy who can run the second unit. They have LeVert as like a very good 3rd scorer. They have Jared Allen should be getting a lot better defensively. DeAndre Jordan is not a corpse. Like he can help you. I don't like the salary. And then they have like, Joe Harris, really good shooter. Theo Pinson can play a lot of roles. Garrett Temple, like veteran shooter and defender. Like they have guys filling a lot of specific roles, which I think is really good.
Yeah, and if you're making the optimistic argument, and I say there's two teams. There's the sort of the Kevin Durant title team roster that they have, and they could even get better by next year if they add another piece. And then there's the sort of current team, which to me just feels like last year's Nets, which is fine. You know, they won 42 games, and then
they do feel very much like that, where like they're going to go in the first round and give somebody like a scare, but they're not good enough to win a first round series.
But I would say like it's basically the same team as last year, Kyrie in, Russell out, and some people think like, oh, you know, sort of a slight upgrade. I'm like, I think it's a considerable upgrade. Like, I think Kyrie is like a more efficient scorer than him. I mean, defensively, he's rated a little better last year. I don't know if I trust that, but he's just like D'Angelo Russell had his first good year last year, and it was still like below league average efficiency. Like Kyrie has been a better scorer for his entire career. Kyrie, as a 19 and 20-year-old, when he was playing on bad Cavs teams, had better true shooting than Russell last year. Like, and he had one of his best years in the regular season last year, Kyrie Irving. Like, he is a fringe top 10 player.
He's really good. He's really, really good. Honestly, one of the biggest differences between him and I would just throw Damian Lillard out there is like Dame is a little bit better as a scorer. Kyrie's probably not the leader, obviously, that Dame is. I think that's pretty clear, but I mean, the difference is Dame has had some like very big moments, and it feels like we've forgotten about Kyrie, like in 2016, like making a 3 to basically win Game 7, and all of a sudden, I think all the off-court stuff that kind of followed him around in Boston about how like the locker room didn't like him, we've lost the fact that like this guy is considered to be like, if not, you know, he's not Harden and Steph Curry, but he's like in that next tier for sure. And he was awesome last year, and that's why I said like their best case scenario is that, you know, he plays like he did last year and these guys really gel and then they win 50 games. And I think they finish second in this division. I think that's the best case scenario and they have a chance to.
Well, and that's the other point I was going to make is like, so Kyrie is an upgrade to whatever degree you want. And then Karis LeVert only played 40 games last year. So if he's healthy, like you know, I think he's a little overrated personally, but he's at least another option, you know, and they're going to have like 3 scorers in the backcourt. So you're taking 2 upgrades, you know, LeVert's health and Kyrie being an upgrade on a 42-win team. Like it's very natural to think they could win 45 games or more.
Yeah, that's what I think. Like I do feel like this isn't over. Like I feel not super confident, but I feel like, you know, 55-45 or something, like they win 47 games. I mean, like I said, I don't think this division is as good as everyone says. Like, I think there's a very solid chance the Raptors miss the playoffs. I think the Celtics hype is totally out of control. And we'll get to that in a second. But, like, I think the Celtics hype is way out of control.
Well, let's get to that in a second. But, like, I think it's one of those, I wouldn't have bet the Knicks over under because I thought it was pretty close. I wouldn't bet this one just because
it is close.
I'm a big fan of Kyrie, but, you know, he misses 10, 15 games a year so far historically. So I just hate betting on a team where I feel very reliant on a brittle guy.
What's their worst case scenario, Zan? Because it seems like, you know, a lot of it's like, hey,
I don't know if it exists. Like, say they win 35 games, I'd still feel pretty good about.
Right. They're playing the long game. You know what I mean? It's like, let's get all these pieces to fit together. And then you put Kyrie or you put KD in who fits with everybody. Not personality wise, but just like,
I think the worst case is about LeVert, let's say, because last year he shot 31% from 3. And so when I say he's slightly overrated, I just mean that, you know, he was on effectively a bad team putting up numbers prior to last year. And so people thought he was like this young superstar.
He can score. He can really score.
He can pass. He's injury prone though, and he's not a great shooter. So
true. He plays a very weird style.
Yeah. And does that fit with 2 other stars?
The poor bootleg TJ Warren. How about that?
And I thought, so he was going to be a free agent. So I'm like, I don't know if they're going to keep him. But then they signed a new extension, 16 million, 17 million, 18 million.
Well, they've locked everybody of substance other than Jared Allen, who obviously is coming up for contract. But everybody of substance on this team is locked in through Kevin Durant and Kyrie's deals.
So, but that's the one thing. Like, if you talk about downside, who cares? You know, end of the day, if they lose in the first round or they miss the playoffs, it's not the end of the world. If LeVert doesn't fit, and then maybe he's just a 6th man, maybe, or something, and you end up paying him $19 million in the future, then you might think, oh, that kind of, I don't know, maybe they need to trade him or something. If the roster doesn't feel like it's going to fit in some way, that means more than the wins and losses.
Yeah, it's interesting because we won't really know how it looks because they'll close games a lot with, you know, Kyrie, Dinwiddie, LeVert, Jared Allen, and then obviously next year that'll be Durant, or instead of Allen, maybe DeAndre Jordan. But this year we don't really get to see that. So it'll be interesting to see how those guys fit. But how about this? Worst case scenario, Kyrie quits the team mid-season to start an art collective in Tribeca. Is that a possibility? Like, that's the thing. These personalities, Spencer Dinwiddie gets a ton of credit for like kind of like building this culture off the court. He seems like an awesome dude. But Kyrie has had a very tough time in locker rooms. He and Kevin Durant are very interesting characters. How's that? Interesting. Is that diplomatic enough? What if they just don't gel with the team?
I think they both. I like their fit. Again, I'm a little bit of a Durant apologist, but like I like the sense that these are two champions. Technically they both won rings. That rare circumstance have a chip on their shoulder. Still, they still feel like they have something to prove.
All right, bold predictions. What do you got for this team?
I'm gonna say one of my favorite players in the entire league, and I'm hoping he gets minutes because I think he could prove to be a contributor when they win the title in 2 years. Theo Pinson. I just love his all-around game. If he can shoot threes even at 33%, I think he's a productive NBA player. I think he establishes himself as a true NBA rotation player.
Okay. I got two. First one, Kyrie finishes top 5 in the NBA in scoring. I think this is going to be a monster year for him. I think he's got a ton of pieces around him to give him a ton of space. I think Kenny Atkinson's offensive scheme is better than Brad Stevens is. And so I think Kyrie's going to have a huge year. The other one I have, and I talked a lot of junk about Jared Allen and how like guys look at blocks and they're like, oh, he's a good defender. And they watch it. It's like, God, he challenges guys to the rim. He blocked LeBron. He blocked Giannis. DeAndre Jordan is the original, like, Doc Rivers starts a campaign to like build up DeAndre Jordan because let's say he's the best defender in the NBA and DeAndre Jordan was always an okay defender. I think that happens this year and Jared Allen finishes in the top 3 for Defensive Player of the Year. I think DeAndre and Kevin Durant and Kyrie and the Nets front office, all they do is talk about how amazing Jared Allen is so that he just buys into the role of like screen and dive big, screen and dive big, screen and dive big. Like, and I think he ends up getting a ton of hype for Defensive Player of the Year. And I don't end up ultimately thinking he's going to win it. And I don't think he'll even be one of the 10 best defenders in the league. But I think
that's a good point. Like defensive awards in general are very reputation based, very narrative based. I just saw Josh Norman got roasted on Monday night. Like the fact that he was a big talker helped him get a lot of attention in Carolina.
Apparently he was really good. Somebody was telling me this before. It's like, now he's just not very good, Josh Norman. And he used to be really good. And it's like, oh, that sucks, but I don't know because he talks a ton of crap.
Okay, those are good predictions. League pass rating, I think it's pretty high. I agree. Like Kyrie, we've talked about this before, but Kyrie Irving, love him or hate him off the court. On the court, he's extremely entertaining, makes a lot of shots.
They have 3 guys who are incredibly fun to watch in Dinwiddie, LeVert, and Kyrie. I gave him a B+. I don't ultimately think they'll be quite as good. Like, I don't think they'll be, like, beautiful to watch on offense. I think they'll be fun, but I do think, again, it's like LeVert is an ISO guy. Like, Dinwiddie is more of a point guard than Kyrie, but, like, he's an ISO guy. So, I think it's going to be – we might see this team be a little bit more like – I think, like I said, poor man's Warriors is what I think. They're just going to run pick and roll every play, and I think it'll be fun. But I B+, I think, and then with KD next year, if everything fits together, like, this team is very scary in my opinion.
And I'm not totally ruling him out coming back just because – I don't know what they're feeding these athletes these days.
It's very important for KD to get another ring without he's going to come back with a chip and be like, the Warriors didn't make me, like I made them. So I could see it, I guess. Because I'll be honest with you, even with 75% of KD, this team is definitely better than Philly, and I think Milwaukee. I think. Guys, we got to take a quick break to talk about RJ Bell's Dream Preview. Football season is here, and it's time to dominate the competition with your fantasy picks. And RJ Bell's Dream Preview on Podcast One Sportsnet is your secret weapon to victory. Eagles or Packers, Titans or Falcons, Pats or Bills. No matter the matchup, RJ's got you handled with the top-notch analysis for the best NFL picks around. Download RJ Bell's Dream Preview every week on Apple Podcasts and PodcastOne.com. And now, back to the Atlantic Division.
Well, let's talk about who's the next team here.
Toronto.
Okay.
Last year, 58-24. Their over-under on Bovada is 46.5. I'm just going to say it right now. This is a snap under for me. This number is ridiculous.
Well, can I make the argument for, the only real roster change is losing Kawhi and Danny Green, right?
Here's what we got. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson in, who I actually like. Stanley Johnson in, doesn't really make a ton of sense. Chris Boucher is a guy who has been awesome in the G League, and like they've kind of tracked him for a while. I think he'll finally be a rotation piece. And then they drafted Terrence Davis, and like that's pretty much it. Everything else is pretty similar. So my kind of like shot at their starting lineup, and I don't really know. I think it's smarter to bring Ibaka off the bench as a 5-man, but I think they'll probably start him, and it'll be like Kyle, Norman Powell, Siakam, Ibaka, and Gasol, and then their bench is like your boy Fred VanVleet, awesome. OG Anunoby's finally healthy. Rondé, Pat McCaw, Chris Boucher, Stanley Johnson, and Terrence Davis. Like this doesn't look like a playoff team to me.
Well, can I give you the positive argument?
Give it to me. Yeah, give it to me.
Because you can argue against. And I'm not saying I'm not saying I necessarily believe this, but there's this sort of perception that Kawhi Leonard is somehow the best player in the NBA now because he led this, average team to a title. There's a few things wrong with that. Number one, like Toronto has been quite good lately. The last 4 years, 56 wins, 51 wins, 59 wins previous year, and then 58 last year. So they actually won more games, and their advanced stats were better prior to Kawhi Leonard. And they were at like 15-5 without him. And remember, he only played 60 games last year.
Right, and they were top 5 in offense and defense in the regular season.
Right, great coach. And I just noticed looking at Basketball Reference, Nick Nurse. One of the things he's done is push their pace. I guess this is per possessions or whatever. Like it went from 92, 92, 94, 97, all the way up to 100 last year. So they're pushing it.
They played slower. They played slower with Kawhi than they did without Kawhi, by the way.
So I'm not saying they're going to win 50 games for the 5th year in a row, but
they've won 50 games 5 years in a row.
4 years in a row.
Wow.
4 years in a row. Yeah. Wow. And before that, 49 and 48. So this is a team that's beat this over under now 6 years in a row. So are we saying Kawhi Leonard, you're saying he's worth more than 13, 14 wins? That's your negative take.
I think Kawhi and Danny Green, honestly.
Right.
The one thing I really worry about with this team is that I think Siakam is awesome. I think like I was on the Siakam train at the beginning. Like I really like Pascal Siakam, but it's nice when you have a security blanket of like Kawhi Leonard to get you buckets and you have Danny Green to guard and like space the floor a little bit. And this team this roster feels really light. Like if Siakam doesn't become like a 25 point per game scorer, like where do they replace that production from? Like where are they getting 40 points a game from?
Right. And that's like the negative. And I tend to agree with you on this front. Like, okay, you lose Kawhi Leonard, that's a blow. And then Danny Green on top of it, it almost does feel like the straw that broke the camel's back because like their wing depth is just maybe the worst in the league.
It's really weird because I just don't think they have like Siakam's going to be their primary scorer. And it's not that I don't believe in him in that role. I absolutely do. I think but for them to be as good as they need to be, like he needs to sort of become Kawhi light, which I think it's possible. I don't necessarily see it happening this year. And that's the problem for me is like, I think Kyle's going to be tremendous. He always is. I think we saw last year how valuable Marc Gasol is on a good team, but like they need something they need like one of like Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, who I actually very much like, but he's kind of, maybe he's a better passing OG Anunoby or a better defending Pascal Siakam. Like they sort of have all these guys who are a little bit flawed and they just need somebody to score, and it's not going to be Ibaka. It's likely not going to be Gasol. Kyle will give you like 15 to 20 points a game. Norman Powell maybe give you 10. VanVleet maybe gives you 10 to 15, and then you need like 25 from Siakam. I just don't know that I see all of that.
Well, and look at the wings I was talking about. Like Roto World list, Norman Powell starting. He's okay as like a 7th man, maybe.
He was out of their rotation at certain times last year. Like he only really got back in the rotation because OG like had the appendicitis.
Yeah, and then small forward they say OG, and then Stanley Johnson's listed next. And Stanley Johnson's been, he's so offensively challenged. He's been one of the worst players per minute in the last few years. And so I do think OG Anunoby is the most important player here. And other people have always been really high on him. I'm not going to write him off because he's been hurt and he's talented, but he hasn't really proven anything.
Isn't it also hard to write him specifically off just because of like what we've seen the Raptors player development staff do with Siakam?
No, and totally. And, you know, the tools are there, but, you know, he sort of has this reputation as like this great defender. And there's nothing that I can see like statistically that backs that up. I mean, he averaged, like, let me give you some stats. Like ESPN plus minus rates him as a -1 on defense, well below average. Raw stats only 0.7 steals, 0.3 blocks in 20 minutes a game. So he's supposed to be this long arm stopper. I mean, he might become that, but it's optimistic to think that the breakout is ready right now.
Well, keep in mind, right, they drafted him coming off an ACL injury. And then in like a big moment last year, like he was hurt because of the appendicitis, and like we didn't get to see him in the playoffs where you get to actually like, you know, where more people watch him. So, you know, maybe he's been better on a night in and night out basis. I don't know, but it's hard. I think he is very important. And like I said, I do think Rondae Hollis-Jefferson is a good NBA player who's also had some injury issues. But again, like all of these guys have just massive flaws. And it's like they're trying to like put these guys together to build Kawhi and Danny Green. And I just don't see it because this roster is pretty light on shooting.
That's what, that like just the perimeter. And then I think they're going to end up playing Lowry and Van Fleet together more than you'd want, just because they're the best, 2 of the 5 best players on the roster. You know, it's all point guards and sort of, you know, power forward centers now. I mean, it's like I don't know if there's a move they can make necessarily, because I don't know if they think they're close to the title anymore. You know, it might just be like, hey, we'll fine making the playoffs with 42 wins and calling it a day.
Yeah, I think that's my bold prediction. Like, I think they're going to miss the playoffs because here's what I look at, right? We look at Masai, and I don't think Masai's in it to be like, hey, we want to win 43 games. So they have some interesting things. Like Marc Gasol makes $25 million this year, but that's an expiring contract. He's a valuable piece. Like we saw how good he can be in the playoffs. Like we saw him guard Embiid. We saw him like be a secondary playmaker for them. Like it would not stun me if Masai moves Marc Gasol again. Because I think you can get, you know, you can grab a pick, you can maybe get a young guy attached to it. Because again, guys need cap space. Now, it doesn't help that the free agency class stinks this year, but at the same time, like, you know, I don't know. Like, I think Marc Gasol is going to move.
It's a bad combination of right now shaky depth. You're reliant on like your top 6 guys, and then 2 of those guys, Kyle Lowry's 33. Marc Gasol's 34. So on top of
we don't know how old Ibaka is. Could be 45, but he's 33, right?
No, I think he's listed at 30.
No chance. 0 chance.
He's listed at 30. But you know,
he's 30. Didn't they already find out he was like a year older than he claimed? Or 2 years? Man, maybe Sam Presti like just got hoodwinked into really feeling like, God, this Ibaka guy's 18 years old. He's already a freak, and he's actually like 27.
Right. So like you could see this team winning between 35 and 45 games. I love Nick Nurse. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I think they're going to win. I think they'll make the playoffs and win, but it's more in that 42, 45 win range.
How much better? Like, honestly, if you just look at this roster, right, like taking coaching aside for a second, and I do think that's another thing. Like, I think the Raptors are going to be really good defensively. I think that's what they've doubled down on in the offseason. It's like, hey, we're going to struggle a little bit offensively, so we're going to have to really guard. And we saw them be really good last year when Kawhi maybe wasn't that good in the regular season. So my question, though, is if you put this roster on paper, eliminating Nick Nurse, put this roster on paper next to Orlando, next to Brooklyn, next to Detroit, is this team the best of those 4? I think their roster might be the worst of those 4. And those are probably your 5 to 8 range, you know, maybe your 6 to 9 range in the East.
No, you're right. I mean, if you take away their title last year, let's say they lost in round 2, you would think this is a prime team to blow it up.
Regression,
like,
yeah, exactly.
You know, is it like Oklahoma City? You know, Oklahoma City right now, do they have a better roster than Toronto?
I mean, does Masai move Kyle? Like, we know that Kyle's not always happy with him and the decisions he makes. Is that a guy that gets moved? Because, like I said, there's no chance Masai's sitting there being like, we want to be the 8th or the 7th seed in the playoffs. Like, if this is going bad and they're tracking to like 43 wins, that dude might just blow everything up.
But then would blow up for what? Like, your one sort of young piece, depending on OG, is Siakam. And so and he's close to being in his prime now. So I think it so much depends on him. Like, hey, if he is an all NBA player, he's ready to take that step and carry this team, then 45, 50 wins is possible.
I do think he's awesome. And I think like in the playoffs, like we got to see them slow it down a little bit more. He had some on nights where he was amazing. He had some off nights. Like, I mean, he's a guy that like he could take a jump to third team all NBA. Like it could definitely happen.
He could potentially win most improved 2 years in a row because just based on opportunity. His stats last year, just raw stats, 17 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. Like, what do you think his totals are going to be this year with the ball in his hands more?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see him be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 21, 9, and 5-ish. Like, I want to see him, he runs the floor, like he gets the ball out of the rim. Like, I mean, I think that the Raps have a bunch of guys that can do that. Like, that's one thing that Rondae was always awesome at, like getting a rebound and like starting the break. I think they have a bunch of guys that can do that. I think they're going to play really fast.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, if the plan is to build like a Nick Nurse fast, sleek, prowling Panther team, Siakam actually fits it really well.
And now you're talking to me into a little bit more because like you can play Marc Gasol as a 5 as like your trail big, like get right into like dribble handoffs on offense and like have guys on their heels. Like maybe I should like the Raptors more. I just think that their roster is just so light.
They're missing a piece.
Yeah, Kawhi Leonard, the best player in the NBA.
But even Bradley Beal, you put Bradley Beal on this team, they could win 50 games.
Yeah, but the other problem is too, and this is my problem with like the Raptors, and like you said, like they're blowing it up for what? And then we'll move on because we've talked about the Raptors, but what are they trading? Like what they don't have anything. Like if you're the Wizards, right, and you look at the Raptors, let's just use Bradley Beal for an example because we just love Bradley Beal. Like, are you making that deal for like Marc Gasol, a first-round pick, and like a newbie? Like, no, like that's a terrible.
Yeah, they sort of cashed in their young chips for Kawhi, and then OG. People were really high on originally. I don't know if they still are. We'll see. If he starts pretty well, then he's immediately becomes a big asset.
And that's why, like a guy like Chris, like this is the thing, right? Like I was kind of stunned, but like you said it yourself, the Raptors have won 48, 49, and then 50, 50, 50, right? So 6 years of 48 plus wins, you're always drafting in the back of the draft. You don't have a lot of assets. That's the thing, right? Like they developed Siakam, like they traded, DeRozan, who was a lottery pick, for Kawhi Leonard. Like they just don't have a ton of moves to make for stars. Cause like I want to think like, hey, could this team get Blake Griffin? And I would love to watch Nick Nurse with Blake Griffin, but like, no, probably not. There's just no way unless Detroit wants out of the contract and they'll go Gasol and a pick for Blake Griffin straight up. But that seems absurd. Like, I can't see that happening, right? So, like, how do they do that? Maybe they trade for Gallinari. Maybe that's the guy.
Yeah, I just don't think they want to cash in. I think they sort of, I think they won their title. I don't want to say they like going to get fat and lazy, but
they might for a year.
They might physically be fat and lazy too with Lowry and Gasol.
He looks good. I actually, somebody I know went to his like he took the Larry O'Brien Trophy to Philly and was like somebody I know was actually there, and they said that Kyle's pretty motivated. So.
Yeah, I think they'll make the playoffs. I'm unlike you, but I would go under. I don't think I would bet it. But league pass rating, there's not unless Siakam becomes, LeBron James or something. Like I just don't see a real interest in watching this team in the regular season.
I got him as a C+ for that reason. Like I think they're gonna be very good defensively. I think they're gonna play pretty fast. But again, like I think they're really light on offense. I think there's gonna be some games where they score like 88 points and you're like, holy crap, this team stinks. But all right. This Boston Celtics, the second to last team in this division. Last year, 49-33. This year, their over-under on Bovada is right at 49.5. And I got to tell you, I love this under. I love it.
What is it, 45?
49.5.
Oh, 49. Okay. Wow.
I'm a big fan of this under. I think a lot of people were just like, hey, Kyrie stinks and he tore the team away. We got rid of Terry Rozier. Like, all their outgoing guys, like, I don't know that they did anything better. So, Kemba Walker in. We both really like Kemba, but he is not as good as Kyrie. Like, that's very clear. Marcus Smart still there, I'm guessing is going to be their second guard. Jason Tatum, everybody loves, Jaylen Brown at the 4, and then like Enes Kanter will start at the 5, and then their bench, a lot of young guys, obviously. They draft Carson Edwards, still have Gordon Hayward, who I think will take a jump forward to being closer to the guy we thought before. My guy, Romeo Langford, I doubt plays a lot this year, but I think he is a very good player. Semi Ojeleye, they drafted Grant Williams. They still have Robert Williams, the Time Lord, and then Daniel Tice. I don't love the Celtics.
Yeah, you've been teasing that, and you unload on why you think they're overhyped again.
I guess their best case scenario is like they win the East, right? Like, and it's possible that a lot of it was Kyrie and like he just didn't, he wasn't good in the locker room. But like they lose they lost their two best players. Like that's the bottom line. Like I don't care what anyone says. Like Kyrie and Al Horford were their two best players. Al Horford was their best defender. It's fine to turn it over to the young guys, but like this team is going to struggle on offense. Like I just don't see it. I don't understand how people look at getting rid of an awesomely efficient scorer and another efficient big man and then replacing them with two worse versions and then just being like, hey, the locker room is going to be better. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. I don't buy the locker room argument. And I actually like the Celtics more than you, but I don't even think their best case scenario is winning the East. I just don't think that's realistic, even as a upside, because like this is a team that lost to Milwaukee last year 4-1, and I think
they weren't in the series. Like people said, like, hey, they were in it, like a couple games swung. Like, no, they got blown off the court at the end of the series.
And I don't see any argument that they're measurably better than last year. So I don't see them, winning more than 2 games against a team like Milwaukee. But that said, I could see them returning to the second round.
Well, the one big trump card they had, I thought, sorry to cut you off, like the one big trump card was that like Horford was a really good positional defender against the Sixers. Like he could guard Embiid a little bit, like he could guard a lot of different players. And you're replacing that guy who I think Al Horford is overrated. Like the SI 100 rated Al Horford the 18th best player in the league. Get out of here. Like we'll get to Al Horford in a second, but like there's no way Al Horford is better than Blake Griffin. Like that's absurd. Okay. It's absurd. He's too old. He doesn't move. He plays 50 games a year. Like he's just not. But in the playoffs, Al Horford's a good defender and he makes you hard to game plan for. And you're replacing that guy with the combination of Enes Kanter, Grant Williams, the Time Lord, and Daniel Tice, and you lose Aaron Baines. I ain't buying it, man. I'm just not.
Well, that's what my skepticism, because I actually like Tatum more than you. I do think he can take a step, long awaited step up. I think Gordon Hayward should be better and healthy.
I also agree with that.
So it's sort of like Toronto to me. Like Toronto's Achilles heel was like very obvious. Like they need shooting guards and small forwards and wings. Boston like has quite a big hole right now inside. Kanter is, good hands, good scorer, arguably the worst defender at center. I mean,
and they don't have a guy as good as like I understand that Enes Kanter has played big roles in playoff series before, but look at the 2 times he's done that, Zan. Like Oklahoma City, he had Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant, and then in Portland, like he had Dame Lillard and CJ McCollum. Like I'm sorry, Celtics fans, like Kemba and Jason Tatum are not as good as Damian Lillard. Like they're just not. And Kemba's a good NBA player. He's a really good NBA player, and I'm excited to see him like under the bright lights. But it's like they don't have the horses, I think, to overcome their inside presence this year, unless, like I said, and I mean, Robert Williams, I think they really like, and I think he's going to be. That was one of my bold predictions: is he ends up playing major minutes in the playoffs?
Right. Well, that's key, because like this is my concern about the center position. Like Horford, for maybe he's overrated or not. ESPN Real Plus Minus, again, to over rely on them, graded him plus 2.7 defensive impact per 100 possessions. Very good. It rates most big guys pretty well. With the exception of somebody like Enes Kanter, negative 1.5, ranked 69th among 70 centers. So you go from it's not even that like he's bad as defense. It's like you go from a good defender to a bad defender. It's like a double downgrade in a way.
Yeah, and like maybe he'll be better. Like you said, let's just assume they play the Sixers, right, in the second round or something. Like, because they're a playoff team. Don't get me wrong. Like they're a playoff team. I just really like the Thunder. Like this strikes me as like a 43-win team. But Kanter maybe gets to guard him in the post, and that's better. But like you should just pick and roll Enes Kanter to death. Like you have no chance. They have zero chance against Milwaukee, like you said. So like if he plays a ton of minutes, and I think like that's the problem. Like they wanted to get better on offense because I think everyone thinks like Brad Stevens is this great defensive coach, and they do have a ton of wings who can guard. Like Marcus Smart is a very good defender. Gordon Hayward should be better. Tatum is an average to good defender. Jaylen Brown's a good defender. Semi's a good defender. Grant Williams should be pretty good. Like, but you can't just punt 2 spots. They're going to punt the point guard spot, and they're going to punt the 5-man spot that we know of right now, unless Daniel Tice or Robert Williams plays a ton more minutes than we think.
Well, and that's the other compounding problem is that Kanter struggles defensively. I mean, he's a good like platoon center in a way, offense, defense.
Yeah, 18 to 20 minutes a game. Like he can't kill you in the playoffs. He might kill you though. It could happen,
but like they just don't. I guess it depends. Like you talk about OG and Anunoby being like the key to Toronto. Like maybe it's Robert Williams for Boston, because if he is like the complementary defense guy, then they'll be fine. If not, they don't really have a reliable backup center, and they don't have like a power forward who could play small ball center either. Unless you think Grant Williams, maybe.
I think they'll try. I think they'll definitely try. They have an interesting, I think they have an interesting
going all wings. Like, because could you see them just going like, let's just play our 5 best guys?
Well, how good can this team be if Jason Tatum is? Let's use Jason Tatum's like biggest comparison, right? Like, let's say Jason Tatum is Kobe Bryant. How good is this team?
If he's Kobe Bryant?
Yeah, correct. If he's a incredibly high usage, like decently efficient mid-range scorer, how good is this team?
I think this team would be like the conference finals.
Okay. So even if Jason Tatum becomes an all-NBA player, and I don't see that type of jump for him this year, maybe in the future, but Kemba's going to be their best player. I think in theory, Kemba's going to be their best player. And even if Gordon Hayward takes a jump, like this team should be pretty good. I just don't see the ceiling that people see on this team. They're not winning the NBA title.
I don't think anyone's really thinking that anymore. If you want to look at positives, I really like their rookie class too. I mean, relatively, you talk about Romeo Langford as a potential scorer, Grant Williams, sort of an underrated, he's just good at basketball, and Carson Edwards, if he can play at the NBA level, it like lights it up.
That's my other bold prediction. He makes some all rookie team, like first or second team. He's too good. Like he's too good off the bounce. He's too good off screens. Like he's so easy to integrate in an offense that needs scoring. He can play next to Marcus Smart. It'll be hard to play with Kemba just because, you're really little in the backcourt at that point. But I think Carson Edwards has a big year for them. I really like Carson Edwards. I think by the end of the year, he's going to play a major, major amount of minutes.
Yeah. So like, I like their depth. It's just like, it's all clumped together. Like maybe there's a move to make. Like I don't necessarily love the idea of investing heavily at the center position, but like could they add, like a Serge Ibaka? Like what would their ceiling be?
Marcus Gasol probably. It makes more
Marcus
sense.
Gasol, there you go. Like if you add Marcus Gasol to this team too, I think they might have enough balance to win 2 rounds.
Right. And like, would you trade Romeo and like a weird contract for Marcus Gasol? Probably you would, I think.
Well, it does kind of make sense because Romeo Langford is the kind of scorer at the wing that maybe Toronto needs.
Yeah, if he can shoot.
He's kind of like a poor man's RJ Barrett. Like maybe.
Easy. All right. Worst case scenario. I just want to throw this take in here, right? This team strikes me a little bit like the Joe Johnson, like Brooklyn Nets, where like everyone's really high on all their pieces like individually, and then you put them together and they just win like 42 to 50 games a year, right? And my question is, given the fan expectations with this team, is the worst case scenario that like Coach K retires or Bill Self gets fired and Brad Stevens just goes back to college, and all of a sudden you have this like 3rd to 5th like place NBA team without, this amazing coach that everybody thinks they have? Is that the worst case scenario? Because like I said, I don't see 50 wins here.
You keep talking about these expectations. Like, I haven't heard any even Celtics fans like talk about.
No, Celtics fans love this team because people love Jason Tatum.
I think the worst case scenario is
their over is 50 wins. Zan. Yeah, that's really good. Like that's a lot of wins.
Now they'll go. I mean, I think 45, 46, 47 wins is more likely. I think the worst case scenario is, let's say, Kemba Walker is an interesting player because he, in some ways he was in a tough situation in Charlotte as the only star. If you only got, playmaker, whatever, everything, do it all. But in terms of his own statistics, that's a great situation to be a 25 point per game scorer. If he's not like a true all-star and he's just like a good starter, then you're paying him 32, 34, 36, $37 million. And he is, how old is he now?
Not super old. He was in college when I was in college, so he's got to be 29.
Yeah, but you're going to be paying him $35 million when he's 33.
Yeah, I don't love it. I thought Charlotte made the right decision to let him walk. I just thought the other decisions they made were really bad.
It's like same with Gordon Hayward, giving him big money. Like it's like that Independence Day quote.
That deal was good. Honestly, it was a 3-year deal. They can get out from under it. The guy snapped his leg in half. Come on.
They should have projected that. Brittle.
Yeah, exactly. Go with your Independence Day quote before we go to the League Pass and the Sixers. What do you got? Bill Pullman, what do you got?
Wait, I have to Google it even.
Oh my God, this is 2 weeks in a row you've brought up Independence Day. I can't imagine if you just
really?
watched it. Yeah, Harvesters, if you will.
The Harvesters. Well, do you want me to butcher the quote, or do you want me to find the actual quote?
Just paraphrase the quote.
But he's talking about the dinosaurs, creation of dinosaurs. And he said, we kept asking it if we could, and we never asked if we should. And I do think, hey, landing Kemba Walker for $35-40 million a year, can we do it? Can we do it? Like, should we do it? Is he worth this much as he ages? And he's been healthy so far, and he's a good kid and all that. But
well, to play devil's advocate, I think at the time they thought they were re-signing Al Horford.
Right.
And I think that leaves, and again, I am lower on Al Horford than the masses, I think. Like I said, when I saw him rated as a top 20 NBA player, I was like, we might need to pump the brakes, because he is very good, but he also doesn't play a ton. But I think this team with Al Horford instead of Enes Kanter is quite good.
And I don't mean to S word on Kemba Walker, because I think, if he was on the Lakers right now as the third option, they would win the NBA title. So I think if he's your best player, if he's your lead scorer, I think your ceiling might be limited. And so I think they need Tatum to be better than Kemba Walker for this team to really get where they want to go. And I don't know if he will. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, that's true. All right, League Pass rating. I actually think this team has an interesting collection of guys. Young guys I want to see. I think Kemba's a lot of fun. I rated him as a B+. I think it's a team that I'll watch. They'll be on TV a ton, so we might get tired of watching them. But I think, like I said, I think they're going to – I don't think Brad Stevens is in danger of losing his job. I think if they underachieve this year to 44 wins, I think there'll be some whispers. I think that. But I don't think he's in danger of losing. I
think he's got to – yeah, I think it would be next year. I think that would be the problem.
Yeah. All right, last team. Everybody loves them. Philadelphia 76ers. They were.
You're so angry today. You hate everybody.
I just think this division's really overrated. 51-31 last year. Their over-under on Bovada is 54.5. That is second in the East behind the Milwaukee Bucks. Really interesting offseason for them. Obviously, Horford is in. They trade Jimmy Butler. They pick up Josh Richardson in the Jimmy Butler deal. So my first crack at their starting lineup, I'm guessing this is the thing. Simmons, Josh Richardson, Tobias, Al Horford, and Embiid, right? Even though maybe it makes more sense to bring Horford off the bench, I think, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, I'm surprised you struggle with that, because that's the big thing with this team is they have 5 good players.
It's ridiculous. Their starting lineup is awesome. It's likely the best in the NBA. I think it's probably not even very close. Their bench, let's talk about their bench for a second. I mean, just in terms of I thought they couldn't do worse at backup point guard than TJ McConnell. And then they're now at Trey Burke and Raul Neto. And I like Raul Neto, but I don't know how much he'll play. Trey Burke is just terrible. They love Zaire Smith. We don't really know how good he is. They drafted Matisse Thybulle, not somebody I was high on, but I think a guy that's going to have to play. Still have James Ennis. Then they have Mike Scott, Jonah Bolden, Furkan Korkmaz, and Kyle O'Quinn. So they got some guys that I like. They got smaller, I thought, which was better, right? Their biggest thing is they've always struggled with Embiid off the court. But I think now they have Kyle O'Quinn can play small ball 5. They could play Jonah Bolden at small ball 5. They could play Mike Scott, even though it's really hard to get stops with him in the game, playing major minutes. But, I mean, the biggest thing is, how do they manage the 15-ish minutes a game that, Embiid is not on the court? Because that's been the biggest thing with them, right? So what do you think? They're clearly their best case scenario is they win the title.
Yeah, they could win the title. Maybe. I don't know.
You don't think so either. I also don't.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't think they can win the title. But I'll tell you, they would be, I think legitimate finals contenders to make the finals for sure.
I don't know that this team can beat Milwaukee. That's actually my biggest hang up for them.
Yeah, but the concern is twofold. Like we touched on. For one, the depth is a major issue, and we can talk more about that. But even last year, there's a sort of perception that they were so close to, last year they almost beat Toronto. You look a little deeper into the numbers, they won 51 games. Their expected win differential, win total was 48 only, because their point differential wasn't very good. So, their defensive rating was 15th last year. So was this team really that great last year? And did they get much better?
I mean, Embiid obviously got hurt, later in the year and didn't play as much.
But at the same time, if you had to take over under, he played 64 games last year. Is that sort of what is expected almost?
I mean, that's the thing with this team, right? And I think like you said, exactly. They lose on the Kawhi Leonard shot in Game 7 of the NBA Finals, and everyone's saying like, man, the Sixers were really close. Like Game 4, like they were up 2-1 and had a chance to win Game 4 and didn't do it. Right? Kawhi made that big three. Here's the problem: the Raptors shot all-time bad that series. That was probably a combination of the Sixers being very good defensively, which they were in the playoffs. They were really good defensively when they played their starting lineup more together. But like, I don't think the Sixers, to me, I don't think they were as close to winning the title as people think. People are like, they lost in 7 to the eventual NBA title, like NBA champion. Great. I don't think this team had a prayer of beating Milwaukee because they couldn't play that fast. And Embiid was like, he had like the sniffles and then he had like the bubble guts and like then he missed a game. And it's like, look, man, at some point, the Sixers are going to have to make a decision. We've talked about this a lot. They were good last year. It's great. I agree with you. I don't think this team can win the NBA title. I don't think they were quite as good as they looked in that series against Toronto. I think that was a very good matchup for them. I think they are going to really, really struggle to try to mount a lineup where they can play like somebody like 38 to 40 minutes a game because like by the end of the year, Embiid's just run down, and then that's the only offense they really run. Jimmy Butler literally saved their playoffs last year, Zan, and I don't even love Jimmy Butler, but like they ran so much pick and roll for Jimmy Butler, and Ben Simmons was like the four-man just chilling in the dunker spot.
I don't love Jimmy Butler either, but you talk about being your third guy, your fourth guy. He's overqualified.
He was like their second guy. He was honestly like he initiated their offense in the playoffs because like Embiid was awesome defensively. And again, this starting lineup will be the best in the NBA. They'll be the best defensively in the NBA for sure. But like he wasn't great on offense last year either.
Well, but you saying like, that's the key point. Jimmy Butler, maybe he's like a B+, A- offensive player. He can run an offense. And JJ Redick, who you're losing, you can run an offense through JJ Redick too, just because he's such a good shooter. So now you go to guys like Josh Richardson and Al Horford, who are good players, but not necessarily like lead playmaking players. So like your versatility in terms of your lineups is sort of limited too, because like
really limited. Yeah, really limited.
Like even if you wanted to adjust the bench, like I agree with you. Like Al Horford, if you say, hey, look, we're going to use you off the bench, or we're going to use you to spot Joel Embiid and give him 30 games off, and we can, lock you in at the center for those minutes. He's not really like going to run an offense off the bench. Josh Richardson, same. Tobias Harris theoretically would be a great 6-man scorer, but like you just don't have enough depth to do that. So I think it really comes down to, talk about the key to the team is Zaire Smith, who's, was injured last year. We don't really know what he has. If he can be a good 6-man for them, then the ceiling of this team in the regular season is much different.
And I think like this is where we talk about analytics, and both of us are very like pro analytics and analytics forward in terms of how we do research. But like 538 loves the Sixers, and I think the issue with looking at 538's projection is like they're just assuming that this starting lineup's going to play a ton of minutes. And I just betting on Embiid to play 65 games is a fool's errand. That's just stupid. Like it's just it's not that he can't do it. But it's like if he plays 65 games, can he then also turn around and win 16 games in the playoffs? Probably not. And my thing is like, I think we're getting very close to Embiid and Simmons eventually just clash. Like I think we're getting there. And I think as the expectations get higher, I think what happened in the playoffs last year was not a good thing because Simmons was very bad. Like he was not a good player. And I think that they need to figure out a way like, look, we just paid this guy $150 million. Embiid's contract is almost up. To me, as good as Joel Embiid is, and there are very few people that like Joel Embiid as much as I do, especially as a defender. I think he's the best defender in the NBA. I ultimately think their path to winning is to get rid of Joel Embiid, and I think that's their worst case scenario. These two guys clash. Maybe Embiid only plays 50-ish games. Simmons is awesome with Embiid out, and finally somebody looks up and it's like, holy crap, man, like this just isn't going to work. And how many more years of Ben Simmons do we have if this doesn't work, especially knowing that he's repped by Clutch, he's watching all these guys kind of take their own situations into their hands. Maybe this guy doesn't want to play with Joel Embiid anymore. And I think that's probably, they could still win 50 games with both the guys, obviously. I think that's totally within their realm of possibility. But like, can they win a title with both guys? I just don't think so. And I think the Sixers need to pay attention and be like, look, which guy are we going to build around? And yes, Embiid is important to the process. He's important to who we are. The fans love him. But like ultimately, like he was a joke in the Raptors series. Like every game, it was like, is he going to play? Like what's wrong with him? Like his body's not right. He's out of shape. He's sick. Like he's amazing when he plays, but like he's unreliable, Zan. It's at this point, it's like, are we really going to keep marginalizing Ben Simmons, who might ultimately be a top 10, top 5 player in the NBA, to cater to Embiid? I just don't think that's the right way to look at it anymore.
Well, I agree with you in this sense. Like, and right now, Embiid's a better player than Ben Simmons.
Embiid's probably better than he's probably like the 7th or 8th best player in the NBA. Like, I think it's really.
I just think. I mean, when healthy. I mean, I think that's such a big caveat, though. And I think that influences the decision. So if you had to pick sides in the divorce, would you rather live with mom or dad? You have to say, look, Ben Simmons is 23, like looks like he's built to last for 10 years, whereas Embiid, I don't know how many years you can count on him to play at this level. So you'd have to lean towards Ben Simmons and to your point, mold the team around him and make it almost like a Giannis situation where you surround him with shooting and space and it's a different kind of team, but it's a team that you understand and it makes sense.
Well, the blueprint to win around that guy exists. Like, name the last like high usage 5-man that won an NBA title. It's Shaq.
Yeah, I think it's
15 years ago at this point, right? That was 2006, and even then, Shaq wasn't the best player on that Heat team. Dwayne Wade was very clearly the best player on that iteration of the Heat. So, like, now we're going back to what, like 2001? Because even Tim Duncan is not the same as Embiid. You know what I mean? Like, Duncan spaced the floor, like he's a better passer than Embiid. Like, you know, I don't know.
I don't know about that. Like, I do think. The thing that I'm less inclined to believe that you can't win with a big center, high usage center, because I think those are good examples, and he could be Tim Duncan, or late.
But the Spurs went. Well, Tim Duncan, like in the recent Spurs wins, was not the Tim Duncan in 2004. You know what I mean? Like he wasn't a high usage guy at that point.
Right. Well, you know, Embiid should he scored 27 points a game. If you get him down to like 24 and 12 a night. You know, he shoots a lot of threes. He shoots 30% from three.
Maybe and he turns the ball over a ton.
Yeah, I mean, he should maybe switch his role slightly, but I'm fine with a superstar center. If I thought he would play at this level for 80 games a year, I'm fine with it. I just think it's more of a health issue. It's a sort of a reliability issue. And, you know,
he is very unreliable. He is very unreliable.
Well, and Brian Colangelo, you know, who's sort of hated and vilified for like leaking stuff on Twitter or whatever, he didn't seem to like the attitude and the work ethic of Joel Embiid. And you might think, oh, he's a douchebag. He's got big collars, whatever. Doesn't mean what he said was untrue. And it probably wasn't the only guy in the building to feel that way. So, and he loved Ben Simmons, according to, you know, this tweets or whatever.
Yeah, I think they are painted into a little corner just because of their situation and what Embiid kind of like means to the city and everything. I don't know that they have a huge choice in the matter. My thing would be, like I said, if Embiid goes down earlier, they start slow and Embiid like doesn't play as much. And Ben Simmons is awesome with Al Horford and, you know, Tobias and Josh Richardson and, you know, James Ennis, whatever. How do you look yourself in the eye and say, like, damn, like with Embiid, like we can really make this happen, when it's like, why are we marginalizing one guy for the other?
Well, and maybe late stage Shaq, you know, you mentioned him, you know, he has some good regular seasons for Miami. And then in the playoffs became Dwayne Wade's team.
He probably should have won the MVP. I think Steve Nash's first MVP. I think Shaq probably had a very strong case in that season. I don't know if it was 2005, maybe.
Maybe that's how you do it in the playoffs. Embiid in the playoffs last 2 years shot 43% from the field both years. So I don't know if that's a health issue, tougher defense or whatever, but like he's not going to be dominating his way through the playoffs. But I don't mind him as a second option in the playoffs if you know.
I worry about the Simmons personality fit. I really do, because again, he is very sort of quiet, if you will, but you know, when he's forced to talk,
you're saying.
Yeah, I do. I worry about it, you know, and I worry about people finally being like, look, man, I'm tired of playing with a guy who just wants to act like a clown all the time, because I think that does end up mattering. And again, like Embiid is so good, but also like they just have a weird fit of guys. Like they need shooting in the worst way. Like we talked about this, right? Like Jimmy Butler could get you a bucket when you needed it. He's not an amazing pick and roll player. I wouldn't even argue that he's one of the 10 best, but he is good enough. JJ Redick was so important to like gravity and space, and they have nobody fixing that role. So what I think happened is like they were like, well, we need to fix when Embiid's off the court. We need to get smaller. We need to get sleeker. Like we need to make sure we don't just crater. And so they go get Kyle O'Quinn, who I like. Jonah Bolden, they're very high on. Like they like Mike Scott for shooting. And then all of a sudden they just forgot about the fact that their offense also cratered when JJ Redick was off the court.
Yeah, missing JJ hurts. I think that's
also
why
they traded Markelle Fultz for nothing. By the way, we just need to say that they traded Markelle Fultz for absolutely nothing.
Zaire Smith's very important. I like Shake Milton as a shooter. I don't know if he's a creator.
I don't know if they believe in him, though. He's a two-way guy again. Like, it just feels like they don't want to, like, turn it over to him. I also really like Josh Richardson. Like, I don't love Tobias Harris. I think he's way overpaid, but they had to do it. But I really like Josh Richardson.
About that. Josh Richardson, talk about, like, great investments. I'm looking at the cap sheet right now. Josh Richardson on the books for $10 million, $11 million, then a player option, so he'll get out of there. Conversely, Tobias Harris, $32 million, $34 million, $36 million, $37 million, and then last year, $39 million.
How many years left on JoJo's deal?
They're all the, aside from Josh Richardson, and he's the shortest term guy, 2 years. Ben Simmons is locked up for 5 years. Tobias Harris, 5 years. Horford, 4 years.
That's the last year of that contract is miserable.
Yeah, it could be the last 2 years, Brad. And then Joel Embiid, the same thing you could apply if he gets hurt, 4-year contract. So the sort of starting lineup.
Embiid still has 4 years left on his deal. I thought he had like 2 and an option or something. I forgot they signed him to like a very kooky deal. I don't know. You know, like I said, the Sixers are
the sixth guy.
They're the second best team. They're the second best team in the East. But like, again, there's some potential for this to go really bad. My bold predictions, I already gave the one, like Brett Brown, not the coach of the Sixers next year. I don't know if he just like goes somewhere else or he just washes his hands or he gets fired, but I don't see it. The expectations became too high too quick.
Say Brett Brown got fired and they come to you, say, will you coach these Sixers? Is this a job you'd be excited about, or you think it's sort of like peaked?
No, I think, yeah, that's possible. It might have peaked. I mean, I think you have to take it, obviously. I think like Embiid and Simmons together, you got to love it. But there's some real issues. Elton Brand in the front office too. Like, I don't know that people are super excited about EB, and Brown has had a lot to say with the team. That's where I kind of think if they end up firing him, it'll just be like Josh Harris and, you know, I can't remember the guy's first name. I wanted to say Wolf Blitzer. That's not right. He's on TV, but the other guy's last name is Blitzer. Like, those guys have been very patient, I think, with Brett Brown. And now I think that in true Philly fashion, like, they're going to get impatient when they probably should be a tiny bit more patient.
Well, you know what's interesting? I not to dwell too much on this, but Matisse Thybulle, drafted with the 20th pick, allegedly a great defender, kind of a train wreck on offense. I don't know if that's the guy you want next to Ben Simmons, but the 2 picks after him, Brandon Clark and Grant Williams, could those guys have started, you know, if Horford was, you know, off the bench? You know, even a guy like Keldon Johnson, I like as a shooter. You know, Thybulle pick's interesting because he's a senior, you know, sort of like is that the kind of guy that fits on this team? Unless your plan is just like choke people defensively and help them to 70 points.
I think that is going to be their plan because I think they're going to have to play that way in the playoffs. Especially like, look, we saw all these videos of Ben Simmons like shooting fadeaways and being like, look at how great his form is. Like, until we see Ben Simmons shooting with regularity in the playoffs, like, I ain't buying it. I'm not. The guy wouldn't even take a 3 last year or a mid-range jumper. So like, they couldn't post him up in the playoffs last year. Like, this is a failure of roster construction. I'm telling you.
Wow. That's bold for a team that's supposed to win 50 plus.
They'll be fine in the regular season. They'll be fine. But
what would Sam Hinkie have done?
God, I don't know. Traded Embiid by now, I bet. I'm betting against the Sixers when it comes time. Like, Bovada, take my money. Like, I have no idea how this team wins against other good teams. And that's what I said, like, with this division being overrated. Like, I think people are chalking them up for 4 playoff teams, right? The playoff teams have to come from somewhere. Maybe that's why I'm a little bit lower on Toronto because I do think their roster's not great. But like I said this to you before, other than Milwaukee, like I don't think the Sixers are the 7 seed in the East.
In the West.
In the West. What did I say? The East. They're the 2 seed. But like there's a chance Indiana's better than this team. Like
the theme of this podcast has been you being so negative about this division, but then you look at the East and you say
the East sucks. Yeah, it sucks.
How many teams can beat Philadelphia besides Milwaukee?
Indy. And I think that's maybe Brooklyn. Maybe Brooklyn.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could see it, you know, if they have if Kyrie gets hot or something like that. But right now, you'd think that if you were just going chalk, you'd say Milwaukee beats Philadelphia to make the finals.
I agree with that. I think I want to see how teams play, but like I said, we talked about this before. Like, if you ranked the best 10 teams in the NBA, 8 of them are coming from the Western Conference. And that's my point in judging these teams in a vacuum. I think everyone's like, oh my God, the Atlantic is so good and so exciting. And like, I think all of these teams are very flawed.
And they all have one hole, but you know what? On the positive side,
that's probably true. One hole is fair, I think.
Yeah. Some on the positive side, like, the playoffs aren't here, so they have time to figure it out. Like,
and that's what we need. We need Brett Brown to do that this year. Like, he needs to be better at, like, Steve Kerr needed to do it last year. Like, try out your different lineups in the middle of the year so you know what you're doing late in the season, Brett Brown has not really done that. He's been like, oh, the starters don't work. What the hell am I going to do?
And there's a lot of bad teams, and the Knicks might end up being one of them, where it's like they're going to be bad and then start selling off pieces. And so a team like Philadelphia and, Toronto and all these teams that have the hole, Boston included, like, they need to snatch up the guy who could fill that hole. And they're going to be out there.
Yeah. All right, last bold prediction. This one I'm the most confident in anything I've ever been. I got Zaire Smith wins the dunk contest at All-Star Weekend. Everyone thinks it's going to be Zion. Like, people love Dennis Smith, like, whatever. Derek Jones. Wait till you see Zaire Smith, because that guy's going to want to do the dunk contest. And then the other one I really like, and this is very bold, I think, and this kind of is hindering on Ben Simmons or on Embiid getting hurt, but Ben Simmons, second team All-NBA. I think he's going to have a big year.
I'll give you two bold, but I agree with Zaire Smith. I don't know about the dunk contest, but he's being slept on, and because he's been hurt, and he is really the key to the team. I think he's just as good of a prospect as Jared Culver, who went in the top 10 this year, same school. My bold prediction, I'm always a little bit of an Embiid hater. I think in 3 years, he is out of his prime, and I think that's sort of the window for him, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think that's why you trade for Jimmy Butler. That's why you go get Josh Richardson, whatever. Like, you just got to keep it open right now if you're building around Embiid. So, league pass rating, I mean, they're an A. I don't think it'll be super exciting to watch, but, they're going to be on TV a lot. Embiid is great. Simmons is fun. Like, they're going to shoot it. And
I think, of course.
They're going to be awesome defensively, by the way. Awesome.
And also, like, as much as we hate on them, like, if you tell me Embiid's going to play 80 games, I could build around him. If you tell me he could play 35 minutes a night, that's great, because this starting lineup should be awesome.
They'd be the best starting lineup in the NBA, probably. Maybe the Clippers, or let's just say closing lineup. Starting lineup doesn't matter, but, like, maybe the Clippers are a better closing lineup than them. But other than that, like, this team they got some dudes, man. All right, let's do it real quick. Your order of how this division finishes, because I think this is the first time I think we've had a very different order.
Oh, really? Because I think I'm. If you go against Philly at number one, I'd be curious.
No. Philly, I agree. Philly's winning the division.
Because I'm going to be boring. I think the Phillies clearly on top, Knicks are clearly on the bottom. So it's about. I agree
with those two.
I would say Boston. Kind of almost talked me into Brooklyn, but I'll go Toronto, Brooklyn.
All right, I'm going to go Brooklyn, Boston, Toronto in that order. So Philly, Brooklyn, Boston, Toronto, Knicks is what I think. But I think allow me to, like, let's look for another week or two, and then let me decide if I think Toronto's going to make the playoffs. I don't know. Yeah, I don't feel like
who is.
I just don't feel like Masai's going to try to be the 8th seed. All right, that is it for us this week. We will be back next week, maybe with a special guest. Not sure what we're going to do now the divisions are over, but we're going to
have an anniversary show at some point. Send in your favorite clips of our year on the show. Some of your memories, some fan letters, maybe proposals to Tyler.
He is at Zan_Ellison on Twitter. Follow him for his political takes. Stay for his basketball takes. I am at CYS Tyler. Episodes of Create Your Shot every Tuesday if you're interested in hearing about how college coaches or NBA coaches got to where they are now. Email our show, xandergellison@gmail.com. And as always, we'll be back next week. And Zan, it's always a pleasure, buddy.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Underdog Sports NBA Show with your hosts, Tyler Laurie and Xandrick Ellison. Tune in next week for more NBA storylines and news.